as you probably already know, and as we're already starting to allude to, our topic today is going to be prepare to launch, key steps to ensure a smooth and successful book launch. We're going to be talking a lot today about a lot of author-led initiatives from the marketing perspective, also giving a glimpse into some of the publicity activity that we like to see at certain times ahead of launch and that we like to focus on. But I want to just, kind of emphasize before we get into all of that, that while we are talking about author-led initiatives, and many of you on this call might be authors directly, I know we also are going to have some publishers on the call with us too, and others who are part of the industry. So I think that there's some really great takeaways for our publishers in information that you can be sharing with your authors of things that they should be doing, as in terms of those author-led initiatives. All of the the onus, all of the pressure does not need to fall on you and your internal teams who are probably stretched quite thin already, for our publishers out there. And so I think there's so much power in empowering your authors with ideas and with potential initiatives that they can be working on in conjunction with what you're doing as the publisher. So I hope you'll also get a lot of ideas here of things that you can share with your authors and encourage them to participate in. So just a little kind of quick overview of our conversation today. We have, with all that goes into the process of preparing a book for publication, the editing to design to strategic marketing and more. It's no wonder the launch of a book is often compared to a birth. I always like to say that the publication date is the birthday of a book, and there's only opportunities to continue seeing it evolve and grow beyond that. But leading up to it, we have to make sure it's ready to enter the world. In our over 26 years of business here at Smith, we have really honed in on what makes a successful launch, and we hope you'll walk away from today's webinar with a clear idea of all that goes into a winning book launch plan, that you'll feel really armed for a smooth and successful launch ahead. With me today is Shannon Donaghy, one of our wonderful publicists here at Smith. Shannon started with us as an intern and has worked her way up to the position of publicist over the last, is it just 4 years, Shannon? I feel like it's
over now. We're definitely
been way longer than that.
I know. I think we're at the 4.5 mark coming up.
Amazing. She has worked with authors of all genres and has fulfilled many roles, both in her campaigns and within our company here at Smith. Her experience lies within social media and podcast outreach. She has the pleasure of running the amazing Smith Publicity Instagram account. And she also does a lot of work in other areas of outreach and marketing guidance for our authors too. Shannon has a BA in English with a concentration in poetry writing and a minor degree in public and professional writing from Montclair State University. And she has also appeared as a guest on Karamo Brown's podcast, Karamo, who is one of the amazing Fab Five on Queer Eye on Netflix. She has multiple original poems published, and when she is not writing, reading, or writing about reading, that was a tongue twister there, Shannon. She enjoys hiking and creating art, and I know, and hanging out with her wonderful cats.
Gotta love the cat.
And I know a lot of you probably know me already. I don't need to read my whole bio to you. I am Marissa Eigenbrood, our company president. I work in you name it, I work on it here at Smith, and I'm excited to present all of this with Shannon along with me today. So as we're getting started here, I would just remind everyone too that we'll touch base with the recording of the webinar. And so if you need to pop off early or you'd like to rewatch, you'll be able to do so. We'll have it up on our website after that as well for anyone who wasn't able to join in today. So what Shannon and I are going to really focus on today is a bit of a timeline. I think that's really helpful in thinking about, when we might want to do certain things ahead of launch. And so when we're looking at, the timeline around marketing in particular, there's certain initiatives that can never begin too soon, especially when we're talking about an author or expert brand in connection to your book launch. So when we're looking at those initiatives, what we mean by that is how you're starting to share your expertise or bits of your story yourself through social media platforms, or even just establishing a really organic presence on certain social platforms. That can begin at any time. And so I always recommend, not putting a stamp on, well, I need to wait until the book is done before I start doing that, or I need to wait until my title is confirmed. You shouldn't necessarily be talking about your book too much just yet, but you can start peppering in and kind of foreshadowing what is to come. I'm currently working on a new book, and here's a little bit about my writing process, or here's some of the things that have inspired me and such. So, you can begin some of that activity, get those social media accounts up and running, get them refined, think about, some of your other marketing channels ahead of time. But where we're really going to start, the nitty gritty of today is the 6 months out from book launch. That's where we get to just really start to dive in and identify some specific action items that we can start to have materialize and start to really work on from behind the scenes. So, Shannon, do you want to take a little bit of that first step into the 6 month out window?
Absolutely. Yes. So as Marissa said, you definitely want to be starting to do some things ahead of time. It's never too soon to start establishing your social media presence and, really hammering home your expertise and your branding. But at that kind of 6 month point, we're starting to lead into launch. You're going to have more of a clear timeline as you're leading up to things. Your book is going to be done at this point, hopefully. So you'll be ready to have kind of your finished product tease out. You'll be setting your publication date, or, if it's already set, you'll again be leading into that timeline and have a clear idea of what that's going to look like. And one of the big things we recommend doing early in this time is establishing a launch team. And this can look a little different for your genre, depending on who you are and what your expertise is. But really what the launch team is going to do, there's kind of two sides of it. And part of it is the vendor partner side, which I'll pass back to Marissa. But the other part is going to be kind of your street team. That's going to be a little more, I want to say organic. I don't know if that's the exact word, but more personal, I suppose. But the launch team, having those two pieces in place is going to be really important to support you. And we recommend starting that as soon as possible. But the 6 month window is where you want to make sure you're hammering those details home and finalizing things so that you have the support you need as you get into launch time.
Yeah, I know one of the things that we emphasized or focus on today was the do's and don'ts. And I think one of the real key don'ts at this stage is don't put too much pressure on yourself and any internal teams you might have supporting you. That could be, just an editor that you're working with. It could be a social media assistant that you might have, an intern that's, just really helping you on certain things. But just know that there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle that we're putting together here around a launch. And it's important to identify what you're excited about, what you're excited to put your time into, and where you can delegate out and think about adding in other teams who could help with other initiatives. Also, where can others come in and really get things done in a faster and more efficient pace than you might be able to on your own? I think Publicity is a beautiful example of that, where, can you do the research and identify a really great bookstagrammer for your new novel that you think would be of interest, that would really be interested in your title? Absolutely. You can reach out to that one person. Can we reach those individuals on a much faster and a larger basis through our work? Definitely. And we're going to find those through our existing relationships, through resources we have and other information that's available to us as publicists. And so that's a process I think that we're always able to do a lot faster, more efficiently, more effectively than you might on an individualized basis. I think the same goes for social media. We do talk a lot about running social media on your own. And while I think it can be a great thing for an author to own because it is your voice that you're sharing through those channels, it can also feel like a lot. I know I talk to a lot of our business authors in particular in that space who say, gosh, I've got my 9 to 5, I've got my book, I'm on a board here, I'm speaking here too. And now I need to do 3 posts every week, minimally on LinkedIn. And that can feel overwhelming. And so, really thinking about if that feels like a stressor to you and it's an option for you to think about bringing in some support to help with maybe writing some of those posts or just helping you develop a content plan, then that could be a really great addition to your launch team. So, beginning to think about where your limitations might lie in terms of time, in terms of energy, and what individuals you can bring in to support you through all of that. It's also the decision on who you bring into your team is going to be really rooted in your goals and your audience too. really taking that step back to think about, if my goal for this launch is for it to lead to more speaking opportunities, for it to lead to more consulting work for me, for it to, even if the goals are fully book centric and it's for the book to just fly off the shelves and sell, thousands of copies, you're going to want to think about the team that you need in place to support those particular goals. Those digital marketing teams, great for those more business centric goals. If you've got really, a lot of bulk sale opportunities involved, then you might want to be bringing in a team like a book highlight, for example, as a wonderful partner to be able to channel those sales in the best way possible. If you are, thinking about bestseller, lights in your eyes, then there's other teams that can support with that as well. And so, really identify, what are those goals? Who do I want to reach with these goals? And again, what people do I need to have around me to support that? Those are a couple of key vendor partners I just kind of mentioned there quickly, around the nonfiction space in particular. I think is where that applies. And Shannon, you had a couple others for like fiction and children's books that you thought were great additions to a launch team.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to back up for a second too about what you were saying about social media, Marissa, I tell authors all the time that there's a reason that there are jobs dedicated specifically to social media management. Many people now, their only job is social media management. It's part of my job. So it is something people get paid for. So don't, beat yourself up if you are feeling that it is too much time and you do need to outsource that. It is a lot of work. And another quick recommendation there, I always tell people, be careful not to spread yourself too thin on social media. I recommend sticking to 1 or 2 platforms and really honing your audience there, thinking about where your audience is in terms of choosing a platform and, focusing your energy there. But aside from some social media management, if you choose to go that route, some other things to think about on the fiction and children's book side, graphic designers, or if you're a children's book author, you might already have an illustrator that you work with that can help you create some kind of promo graphics or things outside of the book content that you can use to promote, whether it be for advertisements or on social media. For fiction and children's as well, it can be bonus content that you're maybe enticing people to sign up for your newsletter with, or eventually pre-order the book. So things like character drawings, or for children's books, coloring pages. And then the other thing to note here too is thinking about the book trailer. If you plan to do that yourself, if you want a book trailer, or there are plenty of other really amazing either freelance or video companies that can help you get that up and running as well.
Those are awesome points, Shannon. So we talked about kind of this launch team in terms of, I would say more like vendors and such, and then finding those partners. I always recommend, going to your networks that you know of, asking your publisher for recommendations. You can certainly do your own due diligence online, but it's likely that those contacts that are in your spheres already are going to have some great recommendations to pass along. We typically have many of those to pass along to those that we work with as well. And one quick thing I want to call out is just please feel free to add your questions along the way into our chat here. We're going to have a full Q&A at the end, but would love to just start populating some of those great questions and pain points that you're experiencing around launch, in there, so we can address them later on. But so we have that more vendor street team focus, and now we also have on the other side what we like to refer to as kind of your launch street teams too. And that's going to be more of those individuals who are within your world, in your personal connections and some professional connections. So I know, Shannon, you referenced it earlier, and you wanted to speak a little bit more to that.
Yes. Yeah. So again, it's going to be a little different for fiction versus nonfiction, but there is quite a bit of overlap here. Like Marissa said, it's a lot of your personal network. So friends and family, but it also extends out to your professional network. And I mean, really, it's the same across the board. For nonfiction, it'll be people in your space or expertise. For fiction, it'll be other writer friends, which is also your expertise. So it's kind of the same across the board there. You just want to reach out to people that you can really count on and rely on to share your message and share information about the book. Word of mouth really goes a long way in publishing. It's an extension through social media as well. That is also word of mouth. That's why influencers are, the same kind of thing. So we really want to establish a group of people that you can count on to share information for the book as you're going along in the process. Another thing to note here is, endorsements for fiction specifically. There's a big network, or it's a thing within networks of fiction writers to swap endorsements and kind of make those connections that way. So that might be, if you're a fiction writer and seeking endorsements from other authors, a way to make that connection if you don't already have it. And for fiction too, I would just note that you're going to have many, many readers coming in ahead of this part of the process, like beta readers or sensitivity readers. They're going to come in earlier than your street team. Of course, it would be lovely for your street team to read and share their thoughts on the book, but that will come after the fact. And for children's books, much of the same. The main difference here will be, in that concept of professional network. It'll be teachers, librarians, other parents, other people in your community that, are involved in your kid's life or work with children in general, are really going to be able to help you spread the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome stuff there, Shannon. And going back to that endorsement question quickly, I think that from the nonfiction side, it's again a really great time to think about and kind of build out some of those lists of your first list. Gosh, the ultimate guest, if you can get this person to support your book. Then you have your secondary list of those that are maybe your backups or others that you might have a little bit more of a connection with. Maybe the others are going to be the reachers that you're going to go for. But 3 things I always recommend when you're thinking about who to connect with for endorsements and supporting your book is either their name, their title, or their entity in how they're recognizable. So do people know their name? Is their title something that might be impressive, such as a best-selling author, a CEO, an award-winning fiction, novelist, something where their title can stand out a bit? Or are they working with some kind of entity where they are, working with a major company or organization, nonprofit, where that's going to be very recognizable to individuals who are checking out that endorsement? So just a couple things to think about there when you're starting to build out those lists. But this is a great time to start to identify who those people are that you might want to be asking for endorsements, and who you want to, again, overall have support you and the project as you get ready for launch. And then that'll move into the kind of 4 to 6 month window out. So we're getting a little closer. We're creeping forward, and that's going to be a time when you're definitely wrapping up that book, and it's going to be a beautiful time to start actually executing some of the outreach for those endorsements. So I think that 6 month out window gives you the time to start to identify the lists, and then here's the time where we want to start executing some of that outreach, so that hopefully those endorsements are coming back in. You're going to have those to start sharing through other marketing and publicity activity later on. So the 4 to 6 month out window, again, we're finalizing that team, really starting to make sure that social media activity is solid, in a great place, starting to tease book information. We want to ideally wait on sharing any news of the book until definitely a cover is finalized and you ideally have some kind of purchasing channel available. The last thing I want to do is get people excited about it, but they can't do anything about it. And so if it feels like it's the right time to get something out, but you just don't have that Amazon listing or the listing on your website ready just yet for purchasing option, something else you might consider at this stage is setting up a section of your website. And I see we have a great question from Christina about websites, which is a huge part of our discussion. We'll definitely be getting into that further here. But maybe setting up a section of your website where you can say updated on progress about my new book, or to learn more about it, or to hear about incentives and pre-ordering information, sign up here. We talk about a lot of different marketing channels overall here, but ultimately emails and collecting emails are your most valuable currency when it comes to marketing, because they're going to that definitely more engaged list that's really signed up for this information. And they're going to be a list that you can keep growing and adding to through this launch and beyond. It's always going to be an opportunity to go back to that list and share with them when you have the ebook launches 2 months after the book launches, or your audiobook comes live, or you have a course that connects back to the book, or you have a second book you're launching. But that list is just going to keep growing over time, and it's a very, very valuable piece of currency in your marketing plan. And so always advise that no matter what genre you're in, setting up an opportunity for you to collect email addresses through your website and to promote that through social media channels is really key. when, if you don't yet have those purchasing channels, you can start to, again, talk about your book through your social channels, through a newsletter. You might have other marketing channels that will, give insight into your content, your characters. If you have a fiction book, the world that you've created around it, inspiration, a little bit about your writing journey. So even though you might feel like you're held back from being able to share, if you can't talk about exactly what's in the book, there's so much about the book journey that you can be sharing, again, as well as information from your expertise and overall platform. Within this time frame, we're still, you'll have noticed that we have not talked about publicity yet, so a little early, and we'll get into that next. But the last piece that I would say is important to think about before you jump into that, the real heavy bit of it, 4 months out and leading up to it, is thinking about what kinds of pre-order incentives or other bulk sale bonuses and things like that you might want to have in place too. If it's something you think could be a big part of your campaign, if you're a regular speaker, if you're doing regular presentations and consulting work where purchase of the book can be included within that, you might want to start thinking about how you're going to kind of reward people for bulk buying. Maybe they buy 50 copies, they're going to get a half an hour webinar with you, or they're going to get access to certain materials. And then even if bulk buying is not part of it, but you want to encourage people to pre-order beyond just the excitement around your network, there's giving a sample first chapter of the book, or a chapter that maybe didn't make it into the book, sharing a map that's part of, that kind of explains the world that your characters live in, or there's a coloring page for a children's book that can be downloaded when you pre-order. Any kind of incentive to encourage people to pre-order and to start to build excitement around the launch. This is a great time to figure out and start to plan out what those are going to look like, so you can utilize them as we get into this further push ahead. Shannon, any other points in that 4 to 6 month window before I throw it over to you to talk about publicity?
Yeah, well, if we want to dive into the question about the author website, I think that is a great time to finalize your website in the 4 to 6 month period and make sure, you've got all the elements that you will need either prepped and ready to go live on the website, so you have a base there ready to go, or if you've already got it up, again, like you were saying, Marissa, you want your platform on the website to kind of sustain any of those pre-order initiatives and incentives that you might want to be giving out. So if it is like a downloadable chapter, for example, you'll want to have that there as well. Sorry, I'm just reading the question. You can certainly start it before you've written the book. I think like almost everything, the sooner the better to start thinking about it and start planning it. And especially if you are planning to have a blog or a newsletter where you're sharing tidbits of your writing and kind of teasing a little bit of what you're doing, I think it's a lovely time, especially to kind of establish your brand as a writer as well. I hope that answers your question there, Christina. If there was anything else lingering, please do let us know. Otherwise, I think that is everything I can think of for the 4 to 6 months. And it's definitely going to start bleeding into the next period, the 3 to 4 months, which is where we'll start publicity. Yeah, and I can dive into talking about that a bit. Like everything, it's going to be slightly different depending on your genre. The big thing at this stage is going to be trade submissions. This is where the deadline for a lot of those is going to fall, especially for fiction. It's definitely stricter. The 3 to 4 month mark is going to be the deadline pretty much across the board. Some places will accept after the fact, but for the most part, if you don't get your arc within that period of time, they won't be reviewing, they won't be accepting. So you have to make sure you have everything you need to submit there ahead of time. This is also a great time to do any paid reviews you're interested in doing so that you can make sure they're coming out around launch time. And then for fiction, this is going to be a time where you're thinking about long lead reviews, entertainment, media, book-centric reviewers that are not within the trades. Same thing with nonfiction. You'll be looking at the trade reviews at this point, but it's going to have some more breathing room, like I mentioned. You'll be able to look to reviews outside of the trades that, of course, will have some more flexibility in terms of that timeline. But the sooner the better to make sure things come out around launch time. Other long lead pitching, like I mentioned, is happening here too. For nonfiction authors, you can continue establishing your brand as an expert, sharing expert commentary, booking out podcasts ahead of time where you're going to be able to really dive in depth about the topics you talk about in the book. Even if you aren't ready to share all the information yet about the book, this is time where you can really establish yourself as an expert in the topics that are going to come up in the book. And same thing with articles. It's a great time to get started writing, so you have things ready to go and in the cache that will be coming out as the time comes. And then another really important note here for fiction and children specifically, nonfiction, there's absolutely space for this too, but there are early review platforms that I highly recommend getting on. NetGalley is the one we use at Smith all the time, but there's also Edelweiss and a couple of others floating around out there. These are platforms where you can upload a secure copy of your book so that people can download and review it ahead of time. They can transfer their reviews to Goodreads and Amazon later on. And this is a really great way to get in front of some consumers, but also professionals in your space. Lots of reviewers are on here, lots of booksellers for children's books. There's a ton of librarians and educators on here. So it's really good to kind of get your book out in the market, see what the response is, and kind of take advantage of those early reviews that aren't necessarily the top tier and the really long lead. You're going to get a pretty quick turnaround on that site.
Shannon, would you say this is also a good time to make sure you have a Goodreads profile established as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely sign up for the Goodreads author program. There are a couple of other review platforms or like apps that you can use. And they're certainly spiking in popularity outside of Goodreads. So I definitely encourage doing some research and seeing where your audience is, what platforms they're using, where they're kind of showing up. But Goodreads is, of course, the leader and the king in that space. They do have the author program, which many of the other platforms do not have. So you can really interact with your audience on Goodreads and utilize different resources that they have, including the giveaways, which I know will come up later on. But this is a good time to get your account set up so that it looks all nice and pretty, and people, when they start searching for the book, can go in and see all the info that they need to see about you.
I think that Goodreads has often been seen as a platform that's primarily supports fiction and others too, but I know from our experience, we've seen some really great success with some nonfiction in terms of like the giveaways and such, and being able to help drive more reviews and things that might be cross-posted from Goodreads and beyond. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think that it's, again, it can be a really valuable platform for helping to encourage more of those important online reviews for the book across all genres.
Definitely.
So again, a little glimpse into publicity there, a lot of that setting the foundation and making sure that we're peppering in the content from the book in that early stage. When we flip over to the marketing and social media side for launch, the 90 days out window is where it really fires up. This is the time where we see that as such an important period because it's the window in which people are a little more willing to wait to get something that they've pre-ordered. So when you're further out on that timeline, it might be a little less likely for people to want to pre-order and start to engage if they know they're going to have to wait longer than 3 months. But really the 2 to 3 month window is the place where you want to really ramp up the communication about the book and the encouragement of support around the book overall. So this is the time where we should really see announcements across all platforms as to what the announcement of your book launch coming up across all platforms. I'm just going to do a quick screen share on a few great examples that we have here. So here we have a great Instagram example for Amanda Traylor. She's a fiction author. She just, getting right out there. I love putting her face in the mix here. You can see that who the person is behind the book. You've got the cover of the book included here. She shares a bit about her own journey within this, as well as a bit about the book itself in this post. We're gonna talk about hashtags in a second here too, but really important to start incorporating those hashtags as well into the mix. So a great example here for fiction. And then across here on LinkedIn, I want to share a wonderful individual, Pete Forselli, with his book is coming out early next year. And he went ahead and shared some of the really strong endorsements that he has. This is the very first post that he did. Let people know his book was available for pre-order and all the information was updated. He's got his really strong endorsements as part of it. And what I just love to see is the support. 207 reactions, 88 comments, 27 reposts. People are excited to support you. They're always going to be excited to support you when you have the network around you. And my absolute favorite part of this post is, I pre-ordered the book, just ordered one, getting my copy. Like I love seeing those particular comments here, and that's exactly what we want to see, you know, with that first announcement post. So it's a really great time to get out there to get that official announcement. And as you saw from the fiction post, incorporating those hashtags that are going to be part of your project. So identifying, you know, you don't have to have 10. Maybe pick 1, 2, 3 hashtags that you're going to consistently use in a lot of your social posts. You're also going to ask others who are talking about your book to use those hashtags too. So you're creating conversation around it and connection through those posts back to your particular hashtags for your project. So it's really great, but also add in hashtags that are part of more trending conversations and those that can connect your project to the larger conversations that are going on across social media too. At this stage, going back to our book website conversation, you know, wherever possible, you do encourage more of the author-centric website versus the book-centric website. So you know, if you have a second, third, fourth book, you can add that into the author-centric site versus the site kind of, you know, expiring a little bit as you move away from that first book and onto another one. If you're in the fiction space or children's and you have a series, maybe it might make a little more sense to do more of the book-centric piece, but a lot of times the author-centric will just give you the longevity of that site for much longer than the book-centric one will. So this is the time to really make sure all of the book content is added in there. If you already have an existing website, whether it's a company site or a personal website, that you've incorporated the book, cover images in there, pre-order pages added in, and you're also adding in any of those, again, those kind of newsletter or website signups that we discussed earlier too. This is also a great point. We want to make sure our Sunday best is on at this time. So let's make sure that the Amazon Author Central page is set up. You're able to share your bio on there. If you have that book trailer, you're sharing it on there too. You're talking about any blogs you have. You're just creating that really great hub about yourself. It's almost like your author website on Amazon, that you get to have that presence there too. And then if you are, you know, self-publishing or your publisher is open to feedback, making sure that that book listing is as up to date as possible, discussing the benefit of adding in A+ content, having that developed, or, you know, working with your publisher on what that's going to look like and having it incorporated. This is a great time over this period. Again, we're getting closer to kind of within the 3 months, maybe 2 to 3 month timeline of doing book cover reveals, doing trailer reveals. You know, those can be really great things to add into a newsletter that you might be sharing for the first time. For all genres, this is a window, 3 to 4 months timeline in particular, minimally, is where you want to start reaching out for any bookstore-centric events. So if you see that you really feel like a bookstore event, and I'm emphasizing bookstore here because we'll talk about other events in a second, but those bookstores are going to be booking out at least 3 to 4 months in advance of the publication timing, and ideally they love to tie it into publication, the release timing, so the launch date. And so want to make sure that if there's a local bookstore you're really eager to get in with for an event, you're starting to do that outreach during this time. And then, you know, don't forget to add in the book to other marketing channels you might have. And you say, well, what are they? We talked about website, we talked about social media and newsletters. But some of those other channels you might have is if you have your own podcast, this is the time that you want to start dropping in mentions of your upcoming book within your podcast. If you're a speaker or you have marketing or sales materials that connect back to the messaging of your book, make sure you add a slide at the end of your presentations about your upcoming book and its availability for pre-order and where people can find more information about it. the more places you can incorporate the book into the communications that you have, the better. And I think a lot of that really can apply to the business and overall nonfiction space, where there's close connections between the content and other services you may be providing. But any of those touch points, you want to make sure that if it feels natural, the book can be incorporated somewhere within that. So now we're going to kind of slide into the, we're saying 1 to 3 months out, but it's really going to be that 1 to 2.5 months, if you will. Shannon, take it away.
Yes, thank you. So here comes Goodreads again. We'll chat about that for a little bit. If you do plan to do a Goodreads giveaway, which is really invaluable, we highly recommend. Now is a good time to start thinking about setting that up. Goodreads, one reason we recommend kind of thinking about this spot in the timeline for Goodreads giveaways is because Goodreads will prompt the winners of the giveaway to leave a review about 8 weeks after the giveaway has completed. So we want that to fall as close to pub date as possible. We want them to be able to move that review right on over to Amazon as soon as they can. So ideally, we want to have kind of that 8-week window between when you start the giveaway and when it's finished. Goodreads giveaways are really, really cool. There's a whole bunch of info about them that you can look into, but just off the top of my head, I know anyone who enters your book will be added to their shelf, or kind of it just gets added to their account if you're not super familiar, and basically kind of shows up as some engagement and activity on your book listing on Goodreads. So they're really beneficial in terms of getting in front of those early consumers. We'll also be in this time looking to expand into some other book world influencers and doing some more networking there. This is going to be for the fiction space and a little bit nonfiction as well. Bookstagrammers and the infamous Book Talk will be looking into reaching out to folks there. This is also when you'll want to be starting to prep a blog tour if you're planning to go that route. If you're unfamiliar, a blog tour basically is a tour. It used to be more cohesive in terms of that word tour, where people were kind of encouraging viewers to go on to the next blog in the chain. But basically blog tours, the goal of them is to have a big burst of activity of people promoting your book around launch day. So we like to frame those around 1 to 2 weeks around launch day, so that quite a few people are posting about the book and chattering about the book around that time on social media. I believe the statistic we've passed around the company recently was that people need to see something online about 6 to 7 times before they hit that purchase button. So that is something we think about when we're encouraging those blog posts for the blog tour. And then beyond those kinds of things, just continuing to establish the early interest that you sought out. This is when we might start seeing some like trade reviews, maybe some of the paid ones come in. You'll start to flesh out Q&As and any other kind of feature things that you're working on that you'll be sharing with other people in the book world. For nonfiction, you'll be continuing to establish your voice as an expert and looking into some more book-centric short lead opportunities, and hopefully getting some of those podcast placements that you did early on. Ideally, those will be mentioning the book as well, so that you're prepped to just go right into the pre-order with that. And yeah, overall, just kind of starting to see some things come to fruition, hoping to pick up that momentum that you started really early on in your outreach.
With, again, going back over to the marketing side of things, in this really last kind of energetic push that we want to be doing in the, kind of the last month out to about 2 months out, is really starting to think about what kind of launch events you might want to have. That's a great thing to plan. You can think about it from a virtual perspective, and where you can bring in a lot of individuals from around the world. And maybe you want to have something smaller, more intimate, that could be local for family and friends. So identifying what you'd like those events to look like, maybe how any pre-order incentives come into play, especially for more of a virtual event, in order to have access to that they would have to pre-order. And then planning out, who else might be involved in those events. I think some of the most successful events that I've seen for pre-order opportunities have been when someone else is looped in who has connections to your content. So if you're an entrepreneur and you bring in another really successful entrepreneur, to have a conversation, kind of meeting of the minds that connects back to the messaging in your book, but it's not just you standing there and saying, let's talk about my book, but it's really this really productive and informative conversation that you can deliver that still connects back to your book. We often find those are even more appealing for individuals to want to pre-order and to gain access to. So thinking about that, and then as we move into 1 month out, the ultimate final push of things, I'm going to continue on with the marketing component here, and then Shannon will add a little bit about publicity there. But this is the time where it should be nonstop pre-order my book. Big capital letters. That's what our focus is in this last push here. Is, please join me in celebrating this, in supporting me through this, sharing it with your networks, with your friends. Within that, maybe last 3 weeks before launch, beautiful time to host one of those virtual events. I think the in-persons can happen during launch week or right after launch week. But those virtual events, again, great time to do that in the pre-launch phase, in those last the 3 weeks or so before the book actually hits the world. It's a great time to do a social media unboxing of your books. This should be the window of time where you get your physical copies in hand for the first time of those final books, and it's so exciting. So get the phone out and hit the video and record that experience that it's Christmas morning and you're opening your books for the first time, and share that on social media so people can share in that really exciting and beautiful moment with you. This can be a great time over the month and a half before launch to maybe roll out a series of video content on social media. Could be LinkedIn Lives, Instagram Lives, where you're talking again with other individuals, sharing just exciting moments, sharing a new endorsement you receive. They don't have to be 30-minute long sessions. It can be just a quick session you're joining in for, or other forms of content. Just overall think about how you can share a variety of content, not just in written form, but in bits of video, some audio as well in there, so that people can have experiences with the kind of content that really speaks to them as you're encouraging them to support the project. 2 weeks out from launch is when the push for reviews on Amazon should start to be peppered into your conversation. So they might not be able to really review just yet, but really encouraging individuals to review around launch date is key at this stage. So starting to talk about how you're going to ask people to go in and add their reviews to Amazon, and that's going to really help with the algorithms and just driving your book up in results and the feeds on Amazon overall. It's a beautiful time to be calling out those early reviews, calling out those strong endorsements that are continuing to come in, calling out great media placements that are starting to hit and be published, and to possibly explore at this time if it would be beneficial to maybe run some early social media ads that could, again, incorporate some reviews and endorsements and things like that too. Anything else in that last push there, Shannon, that you'd add from marketing, and just a kind of a quick recap on publicity?
Yeah. When you were chatting about the video component, I just want to know we are seeing interest, especially on social media, skewing towards the video components. So that is definitely spiking in popularity. If you have not had any kind of dalliance into video making before, now might be a good time to start and try it out. It can be, as simple as just using Instagram's internal editing system or TikTok's internal editing system. It doesn't have to be fancy, but definitely something to try out and experiment with. Something else to note on the publicity side in this phase is the short lead pitching happening. So, like Marissa said, we're going to hopefully see a lot of things coming to fruition here. But for that short-term outreach, we're going to be looking at things like broadcast and other things that are quick turnaround, maybe some podcasts, depending on kind of what space you're in. But that'll be the time where we're, at crunch time in terms of when the book comes out. It's not really a deadline, but you can kind of think of that internally in terms of, wanting coverage to land around then. So hopefully trying to get things to happen beforehand. And real quick, before we move on to hop back to Goodreads, I noticed we had a question in the chat about how many copies we suggest giving away on Goodreads. It really depends on your goals and your budget. Goodreads giveaways are not free, so that is definitely something to think about in terms of your marketing budget. And they have a couple of different options. So you could go a digital giveaway route where it would cost nothing for you to deliver those copies to the winners. In that sense, you could certainly ramp up the number to, I believe 100 is the cap. If you're doing a physical giveaway, you can choose to give away signed copies or not, and that you'll likely want to go a little bit smaller in that pool, maybe around 20 copies if you can swing it, because you will be responsible for the shipping cost there. But just some other things to think about at this phase.
So here we are, launch day, and we've done all of these great things. I hope everyone doesn't feel too overwhelmed about all the wonderful things that we've shared and ideas that we've passed along. But we get up to this launch day, and we always want to emphasize that launch day is important. It's exciting. It's the thing that we build up to, but it should not be the end all be all in where your energy is channeled. And if you are at this moment in time, 1 month out from launch, please don't freak out and think that you missed the boat on so many things before this. There are still so many great things you can do post-launch and to keep the energy going. With Publicity in particular, especially within the nonfiction space, we work with authors for well after their publication date and continuing to keep that relevancy of their voice, their core messaging out there to media. The book becomes that resource, that business card that you get to leave behind in support of that messaging. And so it is certainly not over when release date happens. It's only the beginning. And a lot of what we've shared here helps to build up to that. I know too, Shannon, you've seen so much with fiction and children's books and such, that re-energizing on social media that's been happening, and just that books published years and years ago are kind of recirculating and getting that extra push. So you never know when that's going to come into play, or when you can get that extra push from social media and those entities. But on the marketing side, again, back to that launch party, have fun with this particular moment. This is what it's all been, you've been working up to. This is what, this is what it's all about here. So have that party, whether it's just you and your family at home, or a couple of friends come over and you celebrate with some baked goods or pop the champagne, whatever, your choice there. You take this moment to really celebrate with your publisher, celebrate with the team that you've had around you. Continue to really focus on those Amazon reviews at this time. Keep pushing for those, keep encouraging those to come in, and share those celebration around your book overall. But there's still so much more that we can do. And so with that, we have about 10 minutes left, and I know we have a couple questions in the Q&A. So I wanted to jump right over to that. I think that there's a great question I'd love to throw over your way, Shannon, around back to websites again. And Lynn asked if you write both fiction and nonfiction, should you have separate websites, or should it all live under one website? So
yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, I'm going to say it depends. It's kind of up to you. I think there's certainly moments where it would seem like there's a closer connection to the two. For example, I'd worked with an author recently who is in the mental health space professionally, and she had written a nonfiction book about mental health and stress, and then was working on a fiction book where it was a romance where the two main characters were going to meet in the waiting room of a therapist's office. So that connection made sense for her, and it was easy enough for her to connect the two things on her website and have them both exist in the same space where she was sharing things professionally and also more creatively. If you feel like things are completely different between your two worlds there, I think it does make sense if you wanted to forgo creating a whole new website. I might suggest an easier option of maybe making a little landing page that will pop people out to either your fiction or nonfiction space, so that everything is still interconnected. People can still access all of the information about all of your books in one link. So ideally, maybe a space where people can hop back and forth between the two things if you do want to keep them separate. But really, it's going to be kind of up to your own discretion and how closely related you feel the books are.
I think the challenge could be maybe within social media, trying to have both be under the same umbrella. So it might make sense for maybe if let's say what your nonfiction space is going to be more business or politics or whatever it might be, where you're going to need to engage on a more professional network basis. It could be important to share content related to that work that you do over LinkedIn. Whereas if you have a children's book, then too, maybe you're focusing on Instagram or Facebook and how you're talking about where you're talking about in that book. But that can help kind of create some separation further in how you talk about your different projects and draw in those different audiences without turning the others off when the business executives hear about the children's book and vice versa. Wonderful. So I want to jump over to looks like I think it's Queen. So we said, could you provide insights into effective strategies for promoting my book in a way that attracts the attention of reputable publisher houses and increases the chance of securing a publishing deal? I heard recently from a publisher, and it was a pretty mainstream one, that they would rather have a good book with a great platform than a great book with an okay platform. And so it just goes to show you that how important your platform and your presence online is to securing these deals, and what that really does come into play in what publishers are looking for today. And so my biggest piece of advice there would be to continue focusing on where your target audience lives. If you're focusing on the nonfiction space and business or professional space, LinkedIn. If you've got health and wellness, memoir and stuff, Instagram. But really focus in on consistent content, consistent ideas sharing, thought leadership sharing through those platforms. Keep bringing people into your world, into your network, so that when those publishers are taking a look at you, they can see that you have an audience to tap into with your project already. And that's just been a really key piece for a lot of publishers that I've heard from recently. Let's see. So Meredith is asking, how much time should you allocate toward local promotions with reviewers and bookstores and events versus national spaces, or should you focus more on larger scale places like Goodreads? Shannon, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. I think my answer once again will be, it depends. I think there's no one size fits all here. It's really going to be dependent on your resources and kind of your goals as well. So with local media, an advantage is that you are a local, and that in itself can make you relevant to media and also bookstores. If you have a relationship with those bookstores you stop in all the time, of course, that's going to give them a little more incentive to want to help you out and support your book launch. Reviewers as well, that's going to be more so on the media side, like newspapers and things like that. If you already have an established relationship, that's wonderful. If not, like I said, mentioning that you are from the area and maybe could do an in-person interview can really hold a lot of weight for them. I think if you are kind of on your own and you don't have the capacity for a larger team, it could make sense to focus on that local media. And I will say too, a lot of the times we've seen like in studio local broadcast opportunities turn into something larger and maybe get you in front of larger national media. So, it's all about that snowball effect and gaining that momentum. And to answer your question specifically about Goodreads, I think it's a fantastic resource. Anything that's kind of living online is something that most people can access. So I think allocating at least a little bit of time to focus on that, even if you decide that the majority of what you do is going to be local, I think is going to be beneficial in the long run, no matter what.
Yeah, that's great advice, John. And I think that just adding on to it, when we think about national media, there's always going to be more competition in those spaces. And so while we always want to reach for the stars and go for the opportunities that are going to give you wider and bigger reach, building those foundational elements that Shannon mentioned first is really important, with some, not only just local media, but we also think about from a target audience perspective too. Thinking about media that might really speak to your target audience. It might not be a well-known outlet, but it still could have a really condensed and impactful following that you can be reaching first. And then that might give you the clips and the experience to be able to take when going out to more national opportunities. Many times in our experience, especially for national TV, they're going to want that local clip. They're going to want that experience you've had before they might consider for a national TV interview. So it's absolutely worth it. And it's, but I think, finding a balance between not just local, but also with the target audience specific media is really important. Lydia from our wonderful team here is asking when you should reach out to libraries. Shannon, I'm gonna let you take the lead on that one.
Also a great question. To my knowledge, libraries do like to see at least a little bit of a final product. So at least having an ARC prepared would be ideal for them. And really, libraries can kind of vary in their approach, but many of them are, or all of them really, are thinking about their community. So another example where local outreach might be really helpful for you. You know, if you aren't a local author, libraries tend to want to help you out and support their community. But otherwise, just thinking about the communities that you are reaching out to and what those librarians are going to be looking for in terms of supporting the people that they are supporting in their community. So I know I went a little above and beyond the timeline question, but just that's the bit of knowledge I have about libraries.
Fantastic, Shannon. I know we're coming up on our last couple minutes. You have 2 more questions I'd love to address. So if you're able to hold on with us, please do. Brad is asking, do you recommend print advertising such as the New York Times Book Review, Fast Company Magazine, etc.? I'd love to take a lead on that one and say that while we love these outlets for editorial coverage, for earned media opportunities, which we would be pitching for within the publicity scope in many instances, these can be extremely expensive ads to purchase with print media. And so again, really zeroing in on where your target audience lives. I'd love to see take the potential budget that would go toward that and put it toward a trade publication, put it toward some really targeted social media ads, get a lot more bang for your buck than you might from these more national publications. Because when you really think about it, when someone's flipping through the New York Times, they're not necessarily going there to find an ad on a certain business leadership book. They're kind of just perusing, they're going through it. But if you are doing an ad with chief executive, and that's a key audience for business leadership, that really should be reaching a much more condensed target audience space there. So again, love these outlets for an earned media opportunity. But I think that from an advertising perspective, I would go for more of a targeted approach in where you're spending your investment there. And last but not least, with our questions here from iPhone, we have, while ebook is set on pre-order for a month or 2, do you recommend publishing the paperback or wait until the ebook is out before publishing the paperback? Shannon, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, good question. I would recommend setting the paperback up for pre-order too, if possible, and having kind of those timelines match. The pre-orders are, as we know, really important just across the board, but on Amazon specifically, just thinking about your ebook pre-order, I'm assuming it's there. I think both avenues are really important and could be beneficial for you. If you do want to wait until the ebook is out to get the print version up, that's totally fine and absolutely acceptable. But I do think you might be missing a little bit of that pre-order from the print version if you don't get that up ahead of time.
Yeah, one question we get sometimes too around that is that, or more of a statement is that, oh my gosh, my ebook only came out. Now I'm doing the official launch of the print book. And in the world of the media and the world of publishing, the day your book, no matter what format it is, the day that it hits the world is the day that it's been published. That is the launch day, no matter what format it is. And so I think that it's very much worthwhile to go ahead with both an ebook and a print at the same time in launching, as Shannon's suggesting. Maybe an audiobook is something you save for a later launch, and it's another opportunity to re-energize some attention around the project at that later date. But just know that holding off on a physical book launch isn't going to necessarily give you another opportunity for a launch conversation. It's really going to be that first day it comes out, no matter what format, it's going to be the kind of end all be all on the publication date. Wonderful. So with that, just 2 minutes over we have here today. I thank all of you so much for joining us for our conversation. Thank you so much to Shannon for joining me today. And this is just such a pleasure, and to a wonderfully engaged group that we had. I hope you all took away a lot of good tidbits, and we're here for other follow-up questions. So feel free to email us directly, connect with us on LinkedIn, please. and follow along with our Smith social channels, our podcast, our newsletter. There's a lot of great information out there from our team. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And thanks so much again. Bye.
Thanks, bye.